Thank you all for making the time to join us on today's webinar. My name is Natalie Taylor, and I'm a content manager here at Feedvisor. I'm joined by Alex Sklar, e-commerce financing expert and head of business development at Payability. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that we will be sending out a link to today's recording, and there will be time for a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, we encourage you to enter them into the space provided, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. According to eMarketer, 71% of consumers are planning to do more than half of their holiday shopping online this year. And with an estimated 7.4 million new digital buyers in 2020, thanks to the pandemic, brands and retailers are scrapping their traditional Q4 strategies and in-store shopping events to double down on e-commerce and expand their digital reach. E-marketplaces are reshaping e-commerce. In 2019, the world's top e-marketplaces sold more than $2 trillion, and sales on leading platforms like Amazon and eBay accounted for 57% of global web sales, and that's according to Digital Commerce 360. And before the pandemic, Feedvisor data found that 89% of consumers were more likely to buy products from Amazon than other e-commerce sites, followed by Walmart at 52% and eBay at 43%. Now, on the other hand, just 21% of consumers said they're more likely to buy products from a brand's e-commerce website. And that indicates the dominance of e-marketplaces in consumers' shopping behavior even before the pandemic. So now, for those that are new online or seeking to expand their presence, how can you determine which channel will drive the highest ROI? Should you prioritize your own website or maybe an established e-marketplace like Amazon or Walmart? So today, Alex will be discussing specific tactics you can leverage to diversify your online selling strategy and invest in what's poised to be the most active and critical Q4 for e-commerce to date. And this is going to include reasons why you should diversify your e-commerce presence, how to determine if you should prioritize product versus market diversification and ways to identify your niche, an overview of the most profitable options you should consider when diversifying, and ways to leverage outside capital to fund your diversification strategy. So on that note, Alex, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Natalie. And, excited to be here. So everyone knows who I am. As Natalie was saying, I'm the head of business development and partnerships for Payability. I've been in the fintech space for almost 8 years now and was in public accounting before then. And have, pretty much spent my entire career working around small and mid-sized businesses. So excited to be here and excited to talk about how we can, diversify onto other marketplaces and other forms of diversification. So let's get right into it. So we're going to start with a poll, which is which types of channels are you currently selling on? So I'll give everyone a minute to answer this poll. We have marketplace only, my own website only, marketplace and website, multiple marketplaces, and then multiple marketplaces and your website. Yeah, we'll just give it another minute or so everyone can get their poll answers in. And here's what it looks like. So it seems that most people on here are already diversifying. They're not just selling on a marketplace only, and they're not just selling on their own website only. It looks like we have about 60% who are selling on multiple marketplaces and websites, 30% selling on multiple marketplaces, and about 10% selling on a marketplace on a website. So it seems like the folks who have joined us today already know some of the value of diversification, and it's great because we're going to dig into more of it right now. So to start off, we want to understand what are the key reasons and why you should diversify, and expanding your e-commerce presence to maximize your Q4 impact. So some of the oldest, sagest advice, applies to our business as well, and that's we don't want all our eggs in one basket. And that's mainly because it leads into our second point. We don't want to rely on one channel. It's very risky to be too reliant on any one channel, especially when that channel has the ability to kick you off. Most people are selling on Amazon, being the largest marketplace. And, I think what some people have experienced, or, maybe people experienced even during COVID-19, was Amazon prevented sellers from shipping non-essential goods to their warehouses. So if your business was 100% Amazon focused, you were essentially barred from selling on Amazon for at least what appeared to be around 2 months. And it's still been actually a little slow. So it kind of goes back into what we're talking about here of, we want to be able to, for our own risk, this is our business. And we want to make sure that we are in control of our own business. And by being in just one place, you're really putting a lot of the control on that marketplace that you're working with to decide whether or not you're in business tomorrow. And that creates a lot of risk for us. And that's why we're looking to be able to sell in multiple areas, as well as learn the strengths of different marketplaces as well. I think what we also want to think about when we think about Amazon being the largest marketplace is, and a lot of marketplaces work like this too, is they're very focused on the demand side. We've seen with Amazon with the A to Z guarantee, as well as some other initiatives. The truth is, if they're not driving a lot of demand, then there's no one to actually buy the products. And so what they do is they focus on the demand side, they focus on the customer acquisition, and then pretty much rely on the fact that sellers will bend over, break their back to get on that marketplace if there's a lot of demand, as well as for their other investment purposes, and whether they're publicly traded or not. A lot of their metrics are driven by the demand. It's driven by the customer acquisition side. So what that happens is it means that the supply side, everyone who's selling on the marketplace, it's usually afterthought might be too much, but they're the second thought. First is demand, then it's supply. And then what happens is, on a marketplace like Amazon, where you have millions and millions of sellers, they're not all good actors. There are countless stories of different types of bad actors on Amazon. And so what they have to do is they have to create a blanket rule that everyone abides to, and it's not always the best fit for your business. And then that kind of leads into what works today may not necessarily be what works tomorrow. As many know who have sold on marketplaces, they can change the rules with little to no notice. And so all of a sudden you had the buy box, everything was working great. And then there's some new product rule, or someone flags your product for an IP infringement, maybe frivolous, or one of another handful of things, and all of a sudden tomorrow doesn't look like today did. And that's also why we want to diversify, our product and our marketplaces. And we're going to get more into that in a little bit. But, there's some old advice here as well. Like, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think that's, it's very true in business. We always need to be looking to grow our customer base and grow our business, and not being overly reliant on any one channel is a big part of that. And then lastly, when it comes to why we should think about diversification, we want to stay ahead of the competition. There are tons of copycats in the Amazon ecosystem, as well as other marketplaces. They'll see your product, they'll be able to gain a lot of information on how well it's selling, how you're pricing it. They'll be able to look at your reviews, see if there are ways to improve upon your own product, or sometimes they just straight copy it, and they copy your marketing language almost word for word, and they post it, and they're trying to steal a little market share from you. So by being able to diversify, by being able to create a stronger brand, by being able to be seen in multiple areas, it allows you to stay ahead of the competition, as well as if you have a competitor and you have a commoditized product and you have a lot of competitors on one marketplace, you want to get into other marketplaces and increase your audience instead of just constantly competing head to head in one channel. So on the next slide, we're going to see, how to determine if you should prioritize product versus market. And the truth is, you should be prioritizing both. It's a lot to take on when you're doing them both at the same time. So we're going to break it down into some actionable steps. But really, when we're thinking about, do I diversify my market strategy? Do I diversify my product strategy? The truth is, we want to take bite-sized pieces until we finish the meal, but we do want to diversify both of them. So starting with product diversification, some ways to think about this are, we want to diversify really our products, our suppliers, our industries, our brands, what our peak seasons are, peak seasons throughout the year, as well as, our products, consumable, non-consumable, et cetera. So digging into product, first we want to start looking at some new product categories. We want to expand our business into new and complementary products, possibly even accessories, which we'll get into in a second, so we can leverage our existing customer base and existing marketing that we already have in place to have more impact. You know, when we're thinking about new product categories, it could be if we're selling cosmetics, what aligns well with something like cosmetics? Is that going to be going into clothing? Is that going to be going into health and wellness? You know, different types of things. Ideally, we want to have an analog because as we're going to get into in a little bit when we talk about, you know, knowing your niche, we want to try to stay on brand as much as we can, but that doesn't mean that we have to be tied into any one individual product. Other things that we want to think about when we're expanding into other products are the complementary products. So on your screen here, we can see some makeup, and I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not incredibly versed in all the various types of makeup out there. But what I thought this image did was convey a good message of, if you were to start, let's say with lipstick, or you were to start with blush, there are other ways to roll out additional products that are complementary to your existing products. So you're not trying to necessarily bring in a new customer, and we'll talk about some of that in a minute, but basically be able to upsell and sell more to your existing customers while you already have their attention. So that if you started with lipstick, maybe it's moving on to blush, maybe it's moving on to eyeliner, maybe it's moving on to mascara, maybe it's moving on to contour cream, maybe it's skin creams. And all these types of things, as we can see in the picture, we're staying on brand. We're making sure that the packaging is the same, the messaging is similar, but we're giving customers more options to be able to buy things from us. It goes kind of right in line with accessories. You know, depending on what you're actually selling, there are usually tons of different accessories involved. You know, if we're selling consumer electronics, maybe having the power cords or the external chargers to go along with it. You know, and all sorts of different types of accessories. I think one way to always kind of approach accessories is, you know, genuinely look at your products and then start to do some tracking of what else people are buying in congruence with that product. Amazon usually does a good job of kind of bundling different products together and saying customers who bought this also bought that. And that's that same type of mentality we want to think about accessories. If someone is going to buy my product, is that where they end, or are they buying things alongside of that to actually make it work or be used better? And those are types of things that we want to sell as well, so we can capture more of that sale from our existing customer. When we're talking about product diversification, we also want to talk about, you know, possibly working with some new vendors. What we've seen a lot with our customers is those who have diversified vendors to provide to supply their products to them usually are more resilient and usually are able to scale larger because we're not always in control of others' businesses. So your vendors might be having financial issues. That's not stuff they're going to readily communicate to you. And, you know, what we want to do is we always want to be able to grow our vendor relationships, leverage our vendor relationships as much as we can, but we always want to make sure we have a backstop, because just because if our vendor goes out of business doesn't mean we should have to go out of business. And just like we don't want to be tied to any one marketplace, ideally we don't want to be tied to any one vendor. So, you know, and that kind of plays into your advantage as well, because if you can start to get vendors to compete for your business, hopefully that means that you're going to be able to get some discounted rates or preferential treatment, or, you know, maybe even be able to buy product on terms or things like that. And, you know, a lot of that comes from exploring new vendors, testing new vendors out, and trying to grow your vendor network. Lastly, when we're talking about product diversification, we don't want to guess what we're going to launch. You know, most businesses aren't created by having two geniuses in a room who come up with all the ideas on their own. It comes from listening to the market and doing market research. And, you know, there are tremendous amount of tools out there to do this research. I mean, on the highest level, it can be things like a Google keyword planner, like Keyword.io, sonartool.com. I mean, we could literally rattle them on and on and on. But what here we want to do is we want to use verified, vetted research to understand which is the next product we want to launch. And then we're going to actually get into, when we talk about how to optimize, we're going to get into how we might want to maybe be able to test those out. So on the next slide, we're going to go into marketplace diversification. So here, you know, we want to make sure that when we're talking about marketplace diversification, we want to make sure that we're optimizing for a particular marketplace. You know, and some of those things, and we'll get into that in another slide as well about understanding your niche, but some of the things that we want to know is, what is your audience and what are their habits? Does your audience spend a lot of time and money in a specific place like Amazon Prime checkout? Is your product designed for mass appeal, or is it for a specific audience? Do your customers value price over everything, or do they value quality? As we're looking for marketplaces to sell on, understanding how our customers' habits are allow us to optimize for that particular marketplace. So on the highest level, we have all sorts of different types of marketplaces. So we have a general marketplace, which would be like Amazon or Walmart. We have auction marketplaces that could be like eBay or Top Hatter, but then there's even nuances in that auction marketplace. So eBay is a pretty standard auction marketplace. They do have a buy now feature, but then marketplaces like Top Hatter take that auction style and then add a little bit of gamification to it by doing like a 90-second auction. So if you have a product that you're selling that is more of an impulse buy, that might be a great fit for something that has that, that gamification aspect to it. If you have a product that you're not, you think you know the value of it, but you think that others might find more value, then an auction style might work where people, bid against each other and bid up the overall price. There's marketplaces, that leverage social media, like the Facebook marketplace. There's marketplaces that focus on handmade and crafts, like Etsy. There's on-demand production marketplaces like Cafe Express. There's, marketplaces that focus on unique and hard to find items like, Bonanza. There's niche marketplaces like Not on the High Street or, like Goat if you're selling sneakers. There's subscription box service marketplaces like Cratejoy. There's still some old-fashioned classified listings, things like Craigslist. I don't know that I would take that as a full marketplace approach, but there are still listing websites out there that work. There's comparison shopping sites like Google Shopping that you might want to list on. There's daily deal sites like Groupon, and on and on and on, with the point being that each marketplace has their own particular audience, and as much research as we can dig into what that particular audience is. And usually these marketplaces have that, whether they're publicly traded and we can find that in their investor statements, whether there's been other writes up about the advantages or disadvantages of selling in a marketplace. We want to make sure that we know what what the customers on that marketplace look like, and make sure we're optimizing for that marketplace, that we're actually in line with what, similar in language, and making sure that we're selling what fits for that marketplace. So now that we've selected a handful of marketplaces that we think fit our products, then we want to, do we just sell on that marketplace alone, or do we want to, kind of spread it out? And that's where multi-channel listings come in. So with multi-channel listing services, and there are many of those as well, some of them act as just a listing agent. The inventory is still in your fulfillment center or your self-fulfilling, and they're basically posting it onto the different marketplaces, so you can just manage the listing and they manage the posting. And then there's other marketplaces that actually act similar to a consignment shop, where you're leverage. So essentially the company will use an example of More Commerce. So More Commerce is essentially a consignment marketplace. More Commerce will be the seller of record, on eBay or on Walmart. So there you're basically leveraging the size of that consignment marketplace like More Commerce to be able to get the products listed at a higher rate, as well as have a lower commission fee from the marketplace, because you're leveraging their economies of scale. Another thing that we want to touch on here is there are a lot of marketplaces that aren't necessarily fully into the digital age yet, but it doesn't mean that you can't work with them. So, we have EDI and we have API. EDI is an electronic data interchange, and API is an automated processing interface. And so a lot of people are usually familiar with API because a lot of the marketplaces we work with now use API. An API, for the easiest term, the simplest way to put it, it's just a way for two computers to talk to each other. And a lot of marketplaces are integrated with the API, but there are a ton of marketplaces that don't have API, but there's still ways, easy, cost-effective ways for you to use it. And that's through EDI. For those who have sold retail into big box stores or department stores, they might be familiar with EDI, but EDI is essentially a different way of transferring information over, usually in something that looks similar to like a CSV file or like a large text file, and it's happening programmatically. But EDI, where EDI is exciting, is it's affordable, and you can work with companies like Logic Brokers or ShipStation, which essentially allows you to show that marketplace that you have, you have the inventory ready to go in a fulfillment center or self-fulfillment, but it allows you to list on marketplaces that you might not be selling on yet, like Home Depot, Wayfair, Staples, Best Buy, Target, and all sorts of other, more traditional brick and mortar stores that are now taking third-party sellers. So if you haven't explored any of these other types of more of like a brick and mortar type marketplace, I would definitely look into it and see if there's a fit there, because again, we want to be able to spread out our audience as much as possible. And then lastly, there's, looking at global marketplaces. If you're set up and built to be able to ship internationally, there is tremendous, tremendous demand happening right now globally. Some of the big hotspots that we're seeing are Singapore is really big, the United Arab Emirates and the Middle East in general, as well as Western Europe. So a lot of times where people expand globally is they try to do it, globally but locally. So if I'm in the US, maybe I'll do Canada, maybe I'll do Mexico. But if you can and you do have the ability to ship internationally, I would definitely look at some of the trends that's happening in some of these emerging areas and try to see if you can't, ride that wave and get in early. Maybe you don't own the buy box on your product here in the US, but you could own the buy box internationally in one of those other markets. So a tremendous opportunity global that we always want to keep an eye on. So on the next slide, we're going to go into how to diversify on your website itself. So if you're not selling on a website on your own website and you are selling a product that can be sold on a website, it might be a little tougher if you're doing like a retail arbitrage or a resale. But if you do have a branded product, you always want to make sure you're selling on your own website as well, because that's also where you can completely build and drive your own brand. But so when we break down selling on our own sites, we have branded e-commerce, we have non-branded e-commerce. And so branded e-commerce, could look like something like setting up a Shopify e-commerce store or setting up a BigCommerce store, with a strong content strategy. There we're trying to make the brand almost speak for itself. And we want to do long form content. We want to do SEO. I think when most people think about SEO, they think, oh, it's not worth it. I can't turn a return tomorrow. And what we always want to do is we're in this for the long haul. We want to set up an SEO strategy, knowing that it's probably not going to start to pay dividends to us for at least 9 months, but we need to put the work in now so we can start to generate ROI for us down the road. And when we're thinking about SEO, we want to make sure that we have long, genuine content. People have gotten smart, and the algorithms have gotten smart too, and they can quickly see through a thinly veiled sales pitch of, like what was really popular a little while ago was, the listicle articles were 5 things to do this, 10 reasons to do that. And, essentially it was creating kind of like clickbait, but there wasn't any long form content. It was basically like a quick hit and then click here if you want to learn more, or click here to buy this. What we want to do here is we want to genuinely write long content. So as, all the scrapers and the algorithms and all the, the machine learning that's happening on the back end of all these, website searches, the longer the content, essentially the better, because that works into all their modeling, as well as, it's a better experience for the customer. They'll become attached to you and the brand more. If you post things like your mission statement and things like that, you're going to create lifelong customers who believe in your value. And we'll get into that more in a little bit when we talk about your niche. But, what we really want to do is we want to launch, we want to do a first launch of the product on your own website. Ideally, wait a couple days. Then we want to launch on Amazon. Then we want to launch on other marketplaces, then possibly even B2B. And that way we can create this kind of tiered structure that'll allow us to be able to come back and be able to measure and see what the impact was. When we're talking about non-branded sites, the strategy here that, I've recommended to other people and that other people recommend as well is, setting up more than one e-commerce store. Setting up one as the branded site, as we were talking about before, where we're talking about the brand, we're making a strong content strategy, but then setting up, anywhere from like 1 to 5 stores that's mostly based on keyword research, not necessarily a branded store. And ideally, if it's possible, you want to set it up on an old domain that can rank well, or it can start ranking well. When we're using this, like 2 to 5 site strategy, we can easily target and rank for the main categories we're targeting. So if we were thinking about that cosmetics before, we have our strong content branded site, but then we might just want to have a site that's just all about lipstick, or we might want to have a site that's all about, the eye contour or something similar. That way we're ranking for the main categories that we're targeting. And we might want to just talk about cosmetics. We want to talk about, beauty in general. And that way we're creating a larger funnel and a larger net to draw people back in to our merchant facing site. With the 2 to 5 site strategy, we can, if you have if you have a marketplace or a Google issue, and let's say you lose 10% of your traffic on one site, it's not going to be as much of an impact if you lose, traffic on one of your sites, because you have additional sites alongside of it, all driving traffic back to the merchant facing store. And then finally, we keep saying we're driving demand. There are all sorts of different ways to drive demand. I think Google ads and Facebook ads are probably some of the ones that people know the best. But then there's also SEO, as we kind of touched on before. There's influencer marketing. Now, a lot of people think that they need to get their product in the hands of Beyonce or, like Tom Brady or someone big who has 1 million followers. But having done a lot of influencer marketing, what we find actually is better is people that have genuine influence. If Beyonce, if it's a product that Beyonce uses and she tells her following, yes, use this product, I think that might be a good fit. But if your product is not something that the influencer would ever probably use, I don't know that them speaking to the audience will be as effective. Further, there are a lot of small influencers out there who only maybe have like a couple thousand followers, but those followers actually do everything that influencer says. So maybe our influencer strategy is grabbing a lot of smaller influencers who actually have true influence over their audience, rather than spending money working with an influencer who has a huge reach but doesn't have as much influence with them. So there's all sorts of different ways to approach influencer marketing, but if you do have a branded product, it's definitely something you want to look into. Another thing that we want to look into is Bing. I think everyone thinks about that. Everyone thinks that everyone goes and Googles everything. I mean, Google has become synonymous with search. I Google something, I don't search for something. But truthfully, the same way we want to diversify on marketplaces and everywhere, we want to diversify where we're doing our search ads as well. Because if you have a PC, as opposed to a Mac, or certain computers with certain softwares, that search bar sometimes is already preset to Bing. So if someone is just in their search bar, because again, we don't always know how everyone is doing their search. They might not be going to Google. They might be just popping open a browser, going into that, the magnifying glass search bar area, and that might be actually pulling up a Bing browser. So we want to make sure that we're also advertising on Bing as well as Google, and then we want to measure and test and see how it's working. YouTube is also another great place to drive demand. Whether we're working with influencer videos or we're doing our own product descriptions of our videos, as well as then just buying ads and, being part of the YouTube advertising platform. Instagram has seen a tremendous amount of traffic being driven. I know for my own personal use, I see things on Instagram all the time and then wind up at their Shopify store or their e-commerce site as well. So Instagram has seen a lot, especially if you have a brand. It's another way to kind of get the brand out there, get influencers, start interacting with your brand. Pinterest has been another one. Pinterest might be a little more specific depending on the type of categories you're in, but what Pinterest is great for is that very, very top end discovery funnel. There's all these statistics out there how, half of all search happens with Amazon, but that's really only when you know what you're actually looking for. If someone's looking for paper towels, they're going to go onto Amazon and type in paper towels. But if someone was going to search new way for drying my hands, that's not going to be, starting on Amazon. That's going to be either starting on Google or starting on a platform like Pinterest that is really all about discovery. So depending on the type of products and categories you're in, there's a lot of top of funnel discovery that happens on Pinterest. And then Snapchat, we've been seeing popping up a lot more as another good advertising tool and another way to get your brand out there. I'm sure TikTok as well. I don't know as much about TikTok, so I can't really speak to that. But this kind of all leads into what we're going to talk about on the next slide, which is identifying your niche. So as we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, the first step in identifying your niche is really knowing your audience and their habits. Now, if you've already been selling and you already have an audience, you might want to study the audience and then tailor your niche towards it. If you're trying to start like by already creating a branded niche, then maybe you want to see if your audience is actually interacting with it the way that you would kind of assume that they would. But when we think about our audience and we think about their habits, you know, we want to think about things like we were thinking about before, like does our audience really like our brand, or are they looking for convenience? Are they bargain shoppers putting price over everything? Are they looking for specific items? Is there a way to identify our niche, based on like where we're from? I know being from New York, saying, made in New York tends to resonate. Made in the USA tends to resonate, but like maybe where you actually are, your location can actually have an impact on your niche. What do your products stand for? Is there a backstory to why you're doing what you're doing? A great example of this is this company called 10,000 Villages. They're basically creating different types of craft and custom items, and they're doing it through like emerging countries and people in areas like sub-Saharan Africa and areas like that, where it's an entire mission driven behind it. So how are you positioning your product? Is it upscale? Is it luxury? Is it something that everybody should have? Is it something that everyone should need? All these types of questions are the things we want to think about when we're thinking about our audience and their habits, and we're thinking about how we're positioning ourselves to that audience. We also want to think about, are we looking to scale our business? If we make something too bespoke, it might be hard to replicate that. We might have several hundred or 1,000 of the most loyal customers in the world, but that might not be enough for us to actually scale our business. When we think about what does our brand stand for, it kind of goes into what I was just talking about a minute ago. Like, are we, and this plays into how are your products made as well. Are we using sustainable goods? Is there a mission behind what we're doing? Are we donating some of our proceeds to a non-for-profit? Are we looking to create a B Corp over time that has a social impact as well as being a business? All these types of things are things that we actually want to think about. We want to put them down to paper, and we want to see if we can't carve out an actual niche and create lifelong customers instead of flyby customers, if that's what we're trying to create. If we're trying to create convenience and a mass appeal, then maybe that's our niche, and then we want to optimize and focus on that as well. So on the next slide, we're going to start jumping into what are some of our most profitable options to expand on e-commerce. So I think right off the bat, we want to talk about the multi-marketplace approach. There, as we were talking about earlier, when we're talking about diversifying marketplaces, we want to make sure that we're selling on the marketplaces where the people are for the types of products we have. Drop shipping is another profitable approach here. There's two types of drop shipping. There's one where I'm basically, I already have the product. It's sitting in it's basically sitting with my manufacturer. And then rather having them ship it straight to a fulfillment center, and then I ship it out to someone else, or they send it to me and I send it. I'm basically having them send it directly. But that's not typically the drop shipping everyone's thinking about. Typically, the drop shipping people are thinking about is, I've made the sale on the front end through my website, and then I'm gonna actually go buy the product on the back end. And so drop shipping gets, some people think about it in great ways, some people think about it negatively. But what we want to think about with drop shipping is, would it work for the product that we're doing? But more importantly, is it a way that we can test products? So when we're talking about product diversification, a great way to test if if you can be able to drive demand for a product is to maybe try drop shipping. Try putting together some landing pages and some marketing materials towards a product without necessarily having to hold the inventory. And if you're getting a good ROAS and you're seeing like a good pop by being able to drive traffic to that product through drop shipping, then maybe it makes sense to kind of invest in the inventory and start to carry that product yourself. Subscription services are another place we're seeing a lot of people be able to optimize. Here we want to take a look, is our product something that people are buying on a regular cadence? If they are, if they're buying it every week or every month or twice a month, maybe that's something that we could turn into a subscription service. That way we don't have to always rely on them remembering to come back, and we can kind of get them into almost like more of a SaaS model where now the lifetime value of that customer might be greatly increased because now they're buying every month for X amount of months instead of us having to rely on them buying once they remember that they need it again. There's all sorts of different ways to couple different products in, and subscription services. If you do get someone on a subscription, You know, let's say maybe you're putting it into a package. It's a good way to test out, you know, other products. Maybe as you're sending them a subscription because it's lowering your overall cost because you have that returning customer, maybe you try and test a new product in that box with them and see if they like it and try to get some feedback on it. Comparison shopping sites like Google Shopping and you know, some others are a great way to optimize. There we're basically, you know, Google's been making a lot of inroads with Google Shopping, actually directing people to Amazon stores as well as to websites. So that's a great way, especially if you're price competitive on your product, to be able to drive more traffic. Auction marketplaces, as we were talking about earlier, are another great way to maybe you're underpricing your product. Maybe your customers see actually way more value in the product than you even anticipated. And by having different customers compete on that product might be a great way to increase traffic towards it. And then finally, you know, the niche marketplaces. There are a lot of marketplaces that's focused on specific products and categories. So if we're selling those products, we definitely want to make sure that we're getting, you know, we're getting our products listed there. You know, in the example of, let's say, like sneakers, GOAT might be the right place to sell those products. And then last, you know, on the next slide, we're going to just jump into how can we leverage some outside capital to take advantage of this. So we'll start with, you know, financing marketing and, you know, pulling in outside capital. So here we're going to make a couple assumptions. Our first assumption is that you're getting a return on advertising spend, or ROAS, of 3x, that you'd be looking to put to work $25,000. Let's say there's a flat interest rate of 10%. That'll mean that the cost of capital is about $2,500. So here, if we were to take $25,000 of outside capital, for every dollar I put to work, I can turn $3 back. So I'm going to take that $25,000 and I'm going to turn that into $75,000 of total revenue. So the way to really think about this, you know, people think about APRs and they think about rates and they think about all these different things, but we're more interested in growing our business. We're not necessarily looking for, you know, a 30-year mortgage that we're going to pay off for the rest of our lives. We're looking to put money to work immediately, get immediate returns, pay it back, and then if we need more money, come back to take more. So here we want to think about the cost of capital and what the opportunity is. So using this example, if you were to leverage $25,000 and you have a 3x ROAS, turning that into $75,000 in total revenue, you were to return that $25,000, leaving you with 50, and then you were to take out that $2,500 of cost of capital, you're left with a new opportunity of $47,500. So really the question you want to ask yourself is, does it make sense with your current margins and your business model to spend $2,500 to create $47,500 of new opportunity? And it seems a little counterintuitive to think of it like this because we've all been taught to what's the APR, what's the rate, but truly as we're looking to scale a business, as we're looking to grow a business, what we want to know is, what is it going to cost me and how much opportunity am I going to create? Does that fit with my margins? If it does, then you would want to pursue that option. If it doesn't make sense with your margins, then maybe it makes sense. Well, would it make sense with my margins if I did have a different rate or if the funding amount was different? Maybe you're not getting enough bang for your buck with your current ROAS. Maybe that's something to work on. On the next slide, we're going to take a look at another similar example. We're going to look at it this time for inventory. So here we're going to assume that you have a gross margin of 40%, that you're able to buy inventory at a discount for 30% by being able to buy, you know, a large, be able to buy inventory in cash or at a lump sum. The inventory itself is worth $25,000. And so here that because we were buying that $25,000 on a 30% discount, the amount of funding of outside capital you would need is $17,500. We're going to use that 10% flat rate of interest again, and that's going to create a cost of capital for $1,750. So here we want to get our minds to that same type of thinking. If I can turn $25,000 into $41,667 in total revenue, I'm going to return the $17,500 that I leveraged from an outsider, and I have a $1,750 cost of capital. Here I have a new opportunity of $22,417. So again, we want to ask ourselves, does it make sense for my model and my margins to spend $1,750 to generate $22,417 of new opportunity? And then if it doesn't, then we want to see and tweak some adjustments. Is it my gross margin that's off? Do I need to buy the inventory at a larger discount? Is the cost of capital a little bit too high? You know, and these are the types of things we want to ask ourselves so we can understand, does it make sense for us to leverage outside capital? And then finally, I'm going to just go through couple quick case studies we have on the next slide. So here, this was a case study that we had actually had done by Marketplace Pulse a couple of years ago, looking at a lot of sellers as well as sellers who are leveraging outside capital to see how access to cash flow increased their seller ranking. So as we can imagine, when it comes to reviews and seller ranking is very heavily dependent on reviews. And as you can kind of imagine, and as you may have seen in reviews, most people don't write a review and say, everything came exactly as I expected it. Good job, thumbs up. People usually write reviews when something greatly exceeds their expectations. And usually, more importantly, people write reviews when they're unhappy. Well, one of the biggest ways to be unhappy is if something wasn't delivered on time. And we see stocking out and not being able to deliver on time is one of the, beyond scams and fraudulent stuff, because we're going to all assume no one here is doing any stuff like that. That's obviously the major reason for bad review. But when we're talking about bad reviews, typically for your average seller, it's usually coming from, I wanted something now and I got it later than I wanted. So if we put ourselves and if we're empathetic with the buyer and we put ourselves in their shoes, I want this new outdoor Bluetooth speaker that can float for my pool party this weekend. It's going to get here on Friday. I'm so excited to show it off to everybody. Well, the speaker gets delivered on Tuesday because the seller was out of stock and I had to quickly restock it. Well, they ruined my party, in my opinion. And so I may have never even seen this company. I may have never heard about it, but because I got excited about this for my party, I'm not going to write a terrible review. And that could have been solved had they not been out of stock. And so what this case study here showed was, what we can see in the green is those who were able to leverage outside capital to be able to create consistent cash flow and stay in stock, versus the red line, which was people who didn't, and the differences of their seller ranking. On the next slide, we're going to go through two other quick case studies. On the left, we have Sean and Lisa. They have their family Jump City toys. And, as we can see in the chart, they were doing pretty consistent sales, pretty steady, but weren't able to have that breakthrough moment. At some point, they were able to leverage outside capital. And as you can see in the chart, they were able to reinvest in their business and exponentially grow their company. On the right-hand side, we have Gina Goldring of Wild and Gold Distributors. She has a very nice business. She was doing consistent sales, but again, wasn't really able to break through. And so she was able to leverage outside capital in two forms. One, she used, started getting accelerated daily payouts from her marketplace, which allowed her to reinvest in a business. And as you can see in that chart, it started to go up, even though it was in January, February, and March, which are typically some of the slowest times. And then as she continued to grow her business, she started to have different types of buying opportunities. And that's when she leveraged even more outside capital in the form of a lump sum to be able to take discounts on inventory by buying in bulk. And that's when she started to exponentially grow her business. And since she's been a customer over the last couple of years, she has literally more than 10x her business by being able to take the capital, reinvest it back in the business, and grow the company. And then Natalie, it's back to you.
All right, thanks, Alex. So for those of you looking to diversify your marketplace presence, if you'd like more information on specifically expanding to Walmart or eBay, you can download our latest playbook at the link provided here. So this report includes step-by-step instructions to getting started on Walmart and eBay, data-driven statistics on how many sellers are operating on Walmart and eBay in addition to Amazon, measures the two companies are taking to remain competitive with Amazon, and details around seller performance, fees, and advertising on both of these marketplaces. And now we would like to dig into some questions for the Q&A. We also have a poll that you should see on your screens now. As always, if you're interested in learning more about Feedvisor and any of our ongoing initiatives, please connect with us. All right, now let's get into some questions. So Alex, first question we have, how should I determine if it's better to diversify channels or products?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's a tough one. So I think what we want to think about there is, if We want to see if our product has gotten stagnant at all. You know, we want to take a look. Do we have a lot more competitors in our product? Are we still selling as much as we used to? If we feel that like we used to have a lot of rapid growth and now we're not having as much rapid growth, we want to do a little bit of research and see if it's our product that's having an issue or if it's our channel. And so it's a little bit of you know, it's a little bit of science, it's a little bit of art. Hopefully it's more science than art. But we really want to understand is the product still performing, but just not performing for me on my current channel? If so, I wanna focus more on diversifying my channel. If the product itself is not performing as a whole, and hopefully we can get some information and research across just not even our product, but looking at our competitors who are selling different products, then maybe I want to diversify in the product. But kind of what I said in the beginning, ideally we want to always diversify both, but you know, then it's just a question of which one do we do first. And I think, you know, hopefully we can rely on some information and some research that we can do to kind of back up that decision.
So next question, how is financing your business with Payability better than using a credit card?
Yeah, so, you know, and I think that's a great question as well. I think a lot of companies use credit cards a lot. And I would first start by, is the credit card a personal credit card or is the credit card a business credit card? Because what we ideally always want to do is try not to commingle our funds. So, you know, we see this a lot happen with like home equity lines of credit. People use those to finance their business as well. And what we ideally want to do is keep our business financing separate from our personal financings for different types of legal reasons as well, ideally. You know, similar to why we want to create an LLC or a C Corp, you know, rather than be a sole proprietor to create that corporate veil. It's similar with financing. Ideally, we want to use business financing for business and personal financing for personal. But I would say most companies usually get their start using credit cards. And if you're getting great points and rewards, you know, using a credit card isn't a terrible thing. But credit cards aren't really designed, they're not designed to be able to scale with how much a business needs to be able to scale. Maybe your credit card limit's $5,000, maybe it's $25,000, maybe it's $100,000, but that's usually around where it caps out. Whereas, you know, using a service like Payability, we're designed for e-commerce businesses. So we, you know, we're able to grow with your business. We're able to do much larger amounts than most credit cards can go up to. And more importantly, you know, we don't actually focus on your personal credit. You know, if you're credit challenged or, you know, maybe you're, you know, we see this a lot with you know, new immigrants to our country. They might come from countries that actually didn't have any form of credit, so they actually have a blank credit file, or what's called a thin file. So there, you know, we're not actually looking at any credit whatsoever. Your FICO score, we don't even do any credit checks, so your FICO score is not applicable. And you know, credit cards are very heavily reliant on your personal credit, as well as, you know, it's debt at the end of the day. So if you fail to meet your obligations, there are all sorts of different repercussions when you're using a debt product. Payability is a non-debt product. It's based on like your future sales and your previous and your past sales. So it's not the same type of repercussions, you know, in the unfortunate event that you weren't able to meet an obligation.
Next question here. Are there any risks of diversifying marketplaces?
Oh, that's a tough one. So I think time is always everyone's greatest risk when we're talking about running a business. There's only so much time in the day, and then we want to make sure that we have enough time. You know, ideally, we want to make sure we have enough time to meet all our obligations, but then we also want to have enough time to meet our family obligations outside of work. And then we want to have enough time to be able to hopefully carve out some time to be creative so we can think about what the next steps are. So I think when we're talking about the risk of diversifying, it's spreading ourselves too thin too quickly. You know, everything we talked about in this webinar are all things we want to accomplish, but we're not going to accomplish them all in one weekend. And so, you know, we want to make sure that we're not burning it on both ends too much. We're not spreading ourselves too thin, and we're not burning ourselves out, because we're in this for a marathon, not a sprint. So while this is going to be one of the busiest and best Q4s ever, maybe we have to take an approach where we only, you know, depending on how big our team is and how much support we have, maybe we focus on a couple channels that we think are going to be the best ones, and that's what we move into. Because while I don't think there's necessarily a risk in diversifying our product or channel, there's always a risk in, you know, taking away our most valuable asset, which is our time. And so we want to make sure that we're using that as effectively as we can.
Is Payability just for Amazon businesses?
No. So Payability is not just for Amazon businesses. We work with multiple marketplaces as well as those on their own websites. So we work with, just to name some of the biggest ones, we work with Amazon, we work with Walmart, Etsy, eBay, Newegg, Top Hatter. We work with some, a couple other marketplaces for some of our biggest customers that are offline, like Target and CVS. We work with website builders like Shopify and Volusion. We're working on launching WooCommerce and BigCommerce very soon. And so not just Amazon. The way we kind of break it down is, our flagship product, Instant Access, which is the daily payouts product, which is, getting you paid faster for the sales you've already made. That works on marketplaces that pay on terms. And then our Instant Access product, which is a lump sum of capital to help grow your business, that works on all the marketplaces as well as, those selling on your own website.
All right, we have time for one more question. I can get better rates from a home equity loan. How does Payability compare?
That's a tough one, and that's one we hear. That's one we hear a lot. So it kind of goes back into what I was saying before about not wanting to commingle our funds. So home equity lines of credit are, I think before the 2009 financial crisis, it was probably one of the biggest financing tools for small business. And then when we saw the financial crisis, it's why we saw this big upshoot in fintech companies like ourselves and like a lot of other companies. And, really with the home equity line of credit, you're basically it's a collateralized loan essentially, and the collateral is your house. So now, we got to think about this as business owners. It is a source of capital, but do we want to risk one of our most important assets in our life, for our business venture? And where we want to think about that too is, the same reason that we're making an LLC, the same reason we're making a C Corp is to create that corporate veil. So if something happens with our business or someone sues us, that our individual lives and our individual assets are protected. Once you start to commingle funds with something like a home equity line of credit, you're creating a paper trail that shows that you're using personal assets in your business. But more importantly, if you're not able to fulfill those obligations, I mean, the sad reality with businesses is businesses do fail. And if you were to, go upside down on your venture, or for some reason you were unable to meet your obligations, do you want your home and, essentially your family to be lumped, to be pulled into that? Like, that's typically where, when people talk about home equity lines of credit, I tell everyone has to make their own decision. You don't sell financing, you explain financing. And if it makes sense for people, then you want to be able to provide it to them. Everyone has to make their own decision. I would just tell people that you really want to caution using, your home as a primary asset towards your business, because as much as you can, and I used to talk about this back when I was in accounting, as much as you can, you always want to keep separate and have a hard line in the sand between what's your personal assets and your business assets, if possible. Again, everyone's in a different situation. I try not to make a blanket rule for everybody, but whenever possible, if you can't separate your business from your personal, you always want to try to.
All right, well, it's about all the time that we have today. Alex, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. We really appreciate your time today.
Oh, it was my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
And thank you to everyone who's listening in. As a reminder, we will be sending out a link to the recording later this afternoon. And for anyone whose questions we didn't have a chance to get to, someone from our team will follow up with you shortly. With that, please feel free to reach out if you're interested in learning more. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.